Captain Ethan Grant was known for two things: his skill as a pilot and his reckless behavior. As a member of the Earth fleet, he had earned a reputation for pushing his ship and crew to the limit. Some said he was the best in the galaxy, but many also whispered about his risky decisions, which often led to trouble. Despite his reputation, Ethan didn't care about the gossip. All that mattered to him was the thrill of the mission, the rush of flying through dangerous space, and the satisfaction of winning. It was on a routine mission that things started to change. Ethan's fighter craft, the Starlight, was part of a rescue operation to save a fleet trapped behind enemy lines. The enemy, an aggressive alien race known as the Zorvath, had surrounded the fleet and was prepared to destroy everything in its path. Ethan had volunteered to lead the strike force, confident that his skills would tip the balance in their favor. As the Starlight cut through space, darting in and out of enemy fire, Ethan noticed something strange. An unknown ship appeared from the shadows of a nearby asteroid belt, moving fast and precise. At first, Ethan thought it was an enemy scout, but a blast of energy from the mysterious ship knocked out a Zorvath cruiser that was about to target Ethan's fleet. "Who the hell is that?" Ethan muttered under his breath as the unknown ship flew by him, easily outmaneuvering the enemy. The ship was sleek and agile, unlike anything Ethan had ever seen. The strange ship's movements were almost graceful. It didn't make any sense. Who was piloting it and how had they come to be there? Suddenly, the mysterious ship's comms crackled to life. "This is Zirael of the Vorathai Defense Corps. I suggest you don't get in my way. Human," the voice said, sharp and clear. Ethan's heart raced, but he couldn't help but feel a spark of admiration. Zirael? She sounded confident, skilled, and oddly familiar with the situation. Before Ethan could respond, Zirael's ship fired another shot, obliterating a Zorvath ship that had been tailing him. It was as if she had predicted their moves, anticipating their every step. The Zorvath were no match for her. "Stay close, Earth pilot," Zirael's voice came again. "I'll get you out of here." The fight continued as Zirael led Ethan through the chaos. Her ship was faster, her maneuvers smoother, but Ethan wasn't far behind. He knew how to stay in the heat of battle, and he matched her moves with calculated precision. As they tore through the Zorvath fleet, Ethan found himself amazed by the alien pilot's abilities. It was as if she had known every move he would make before he did it. But what struck him the most was how she worked with him, not against him. The Zorvath began to retreat, realizing they were no match for this combined force. Ethan and Zirael had pushed them back, but their victory was short-lived. Zirael's ship had taken heavy damage, and she was forced to make an emergency landing on an asteroid. Her ship's systems were failing, and Ethan knew the Zorvath wouldn't be far behind. Ethan gritted his teeth. "Don't worry, I'll get you out of here." But as he made his way toward her, Zirael's ship was already on the edge of the asteroid, barely hanging onto the surface. "I'm not in need of saving." "Human," Zirael said as Ethan landed nearby, not even a hint of fear in her voice. "I'm capable of handling myself." Ethan shook his head, smiling despite himself. "Well, I didn't come here to argue." After a quick check of his own ship, he saw that it too had suffered some damage. The Zorvath weren't going to give up that easily, and neither would he. They had to repair both ships and get back into the fight. "We don't have much time," Ethan said, a serious edge creeping into his voice. "We need to move fast or we're both sitting ducks." Zirael hesitated for a moment before nodding. "Agreed. I'll handle the repairs on my ship, you handle yours. We'll meet back here in 15. They got to work quickly, each working on their own ship. Despite the obvious tension between them, their species, their roles in the war, the countless unknowns, they worked efficiently. Zirael's expertise with alien technology was impressive, and Ethan couldn't help but marvel at how she navigated the intricate systems of her ship. It was clear she was no stranger to battle, and her mind was sharp. As they worked together, Ethan found himself thinking about their earlier interactions. There had been a strange feeling between them, something unspoken but understood. He had expected to be annoyed by Zirael's constant orders, but instead, he found her decisiveness and competence refreshing. "Finished," Zirael said, stepping back from her ship. She looked up at him, her eyes scanning his. "We'll leave together." Ethan, now ready, gave her a nod. "Right, let's do this." As the two of them launched into space once again, Zirael's ship at his side, Ethan couldn't help but feel a strange sense of gratitude. He was no longer flying alone. But as they headed back into the fight, a new challenge arose. The Zorvath were regrouping, and they had a massive fleet waiting just ahead. There was no turning back now. You ready? Ethan asked. Ziriel gave him a cold, confident smile. Always. The next battle would determine the fate of their mission, and perhaps their entire alliance. As the two ships moved into formation, it became clear that this was just the beginning of something bigger than either of them could have predicted. The battle raged on as Ethan and Ziriel led their respective forces. They had pushed the Zorvath fleet back, but now they were preparing for the final showdown. As the Starlight and Ziriel's sleek fighter ship cut through the void, there was a sense of urgency that had been building ever since their encounter on the asteroid. Ethan glanced over at Ziriel, who was sitting in the cockpit of her ship, her focus unwavering as she watched the enemy fleet ahead. Her sharp eyes moved quickly across the battlefield, taking in every detail. There was no doubt she was an experienced fighter, but it was her calmness under pressure that fascinated him the most. In the midst of chaos, she remained unshaken, as though the war didn't bother her at all. For Ethan, however, every second felt like a struggle. The weight of his decisions hung heavy on him. He had led many successful missions, but this was different. With Ziriel by his side, the stakes were even higher. He wasn't just fighting for the fleet anymore. He was fighting for something, or rather someone, who had unexpectedly become important to him. The moment they had shared on the asteroid, when they worked together to repair their ships, when they looked into each other's eyes without the usual walls of suspicion and strategy, had changed everything. Ethan couldn't shake the thought of Ziriel. He wasn't just grateful for her skills. He admired her strength, her intelligence, and, if he was being honest, the growing connection between them. But it was complicated. She was an alien, a warrior from a different planet, a member of a faction he had only just begun to understand. He wasn't sure if she saw him the same way. In fact, Ethan had no idea if the bond between them could even be possible, given their differences. Could there be more than just a working partnership between them? Would she even be open to the idea of a human in her life, let alone a human pilot like him? The communication line between their ships crackled to life. "Stay close, human." Ziriel's voice came through, steady and calm. "We'll need to work together to outmaneuver their main fleet." "I've got your 6, Ethan replied, his fingers tightening around the controls. "Just lead the way." Their ships were synchronized in perfect harmony as they plunged into the heart of the enemy fleet. The Zorvath had mobilized everything they had, their ships circling like vultures ready to swoop in. But Ethan and Ziriel weren't just going to roll over. They were a team now, and together they were unstoppable. Ziriel's ship darted to the left, her precision unmatched. Ethan followed her lead, diving to the right as a barrage of enemy fire came his way. With practiced ease, he dodged, veering his ship into an agile roll before returning fire. The Zorvath had underestimated them, and now they were paying the price. As the battle intensified, Ethan couldn't help but notice the way Ziriel moved, her decisions swift and without hesitation. They were completely in sync, anticipating each other's moves like they had fought together for years. Despite the differences in their training and their respective species, they shared something deeper, an understanding of the fight, of the need to protect, of the drive to survive. But the real moment of connection came when they found themselves surrounded by Zorvath ships. The situation was dire, and both knew they couldn't fight their way out alone. "Ziriel, we're going to have to break formation," Ethan called out, his voice laced with urgency. "We need to split them up, confuse them." "I agree," Ziriel replied, her voice still calm, yet there was a flicker of something else beneath it. "On my mark, you take the left, I'll take the right. We'll create a gap between them." Ethan nodded, his heartbeat steady as he waited for her signal. This was it, the moment where everything depended on their trust in each other. "Now," Ziriel ordered. In that instant, the two pilots broke away from each other, weaving through enemy ships with a grace and fluidity that left the Zorvath disoriented. They moved as one despite the distance between them. It was like they could hear each other's thoughts. Each maneuver was perfectly timed, each shot fired in perfect harmony. But just as they created an opening, one of the Zorvath ships took aim at Ziriel's vessel. Ethan saw it in an instant. Ziriel was about to be hit. "Ziriel, look out," he shouted, his hands gripping the controls as he thrust his ship forward. He fired a precise shot at the Zorvath ship, just in time to destroy its targeting system. The explosion sent the enemy ship spiraling out of control. Ziriel's ship swerved, narrowly avoiding the debris. "That was too close," she said, her voice now tinged with relief. "But thank you, Ethan." Ethan let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "I couldn't let them get you." The connection between them deepened in that moment, an unspoken understanding that they were both in this together. There was no room for hesitation, no time for doubt. Their lives were now intertwined in a way that neither of them could have predicted. As they continued to fight side by side, they eventually managed to outmaneuver the Zorvath and push them back once again. The battle was won, but the cost was high. The damage to their ships was severe, and it was clear they wouldn't be able to continue the fight much longer. They returned to the safety of the nearby base, landing with a mixture of relief and exhaustion. As their ships touched down, both pilots remained silent for a moment. The adrenaline from the fight had worn off, leaving behind the raw truth of what had happened. They had survived because of each other. As they stepped out of their ships, their eyes met. Ziriel's expression was unreadable, but Ethan could see the faintest trace of gratitude in her gaze. It was a look he'd never forget. There was something there, something more than just respect. "You're a good pilot," Ziriel said quietly, her voice softer than usual. "I didn't expect that from a human." Ethan smiled, feeling something warm spread inside him. "I could say the same about you." For a moment, the war, the conflict, and the endless struggle seemed far away. It was just the two of them standing in the vast expanse of space side by side. But as the others gathered around to assess the damage and report on the mission, the reality of their situation set back in. They couldn't afford to be distracted. They had made it through this battle, but the war was far from over. Still, as Ethan looked at Ziriel, something told him that this partnership, whatever it might be, was just beginning. The connection between them was undeniable, and no matter how different their worlds were, they were stronger together than they could ever be apart. The war was over, but the aftermath left both the Earth and Vorathai fleets battered and weary. The alliance that had been formed between humans and aliens was fragile, built on the shaky trust of shared battles and victories. But the seeds of something stronger had been planted, something that neither Captain Ethan Grant nor Ziriel had expected when they first met. In the days following the final battle, the two pilots found themselves standing side by side more and more. They would meet in quiet corners of the base, away from the bustle of soldiers and commanders. Their conversations, once only about tactics and strategy, had turned to something more personal. Slowly, without either of them realizing it, they had begun to form a bond that wasn't just about survival. It was something deeper. For Ziriel, a warrior who had known nothing but duty and sacrifice, the concept of companionship was unfamiliar. She had always put the needs of her people above her own, never allowing herself to consider anything beyond the next mission, the next battle. But Ethan had shown her a different side of life, one that didn't revolve around fighting. He had made her laugh, taught her about human emotions, and helped her see the world through a new lens. There was something about his vulnerability that she found both refreshing and comforting. For Ethan, the connection with Ziriel was unlike anything he had ever experienced. He had always been a loner, a pilot who worked alone, never relying on anyone but himself. But Ziriel had shown him what it meant to rely on another person, to trust them completely. Her courage and strength had drawn him in, but it was her kindness and understanding that had slowly worked their way into his heart. He had never imagined that someone so different from him, an alien, a warrior, could make him feel so understood, so seen. One evening, after the fleet had been officially disbanded and the war was declared over, Ethan stood on the observation deck of the space station looking out at the stars. The vastness of the galaxy stretched out before him, and for the first time in a long while he didn't feel the rush of adrenaline that usually accompanied such a view. Instead, he felt peace. It was a strange feeling, one he wasn't sure how to process. He had fought in countless battles, but none had left him with a sense of calm like this. "Starry night," a voice interrupted his thoughts. Ethan turned to see Ziriel standing a few feet away, her arms crossed over her chest as she gazed out at the same stars. Her expression was unreadable, as it often was, but there was something different about the way she stood next to him now. It wasn't just as allies. It was as something more. "I've never been this far from home," Ziriel said softly, almost to herself. It's overwhelming. Ethan nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. I know what you mean. I've never been this far either. Feels like there's no end to it all. Ziriel's gaze shifted to him. It's strange, she said after a pause. How we ended up here. 2 different worlds, 2 different people. And yet we're standing here together. Ethan chuckled softly, but there was a trace of uncertainty in his eyes. Yeah, I never expected that. When I first saw you in that battle, I didn't think we'd even make it out alive, let alone end up like this. Ziriel's lips curled into a small, knowing smile. Neither did I. But somehow we did. Together. The silence that followed was comfortable, but Ethan couldn't help but feel the weight of the moment. It was as though the very air around them had shifted. There was something unspoken between them. Something that had grown slowly over the past few weeks, and now it was undeniable. Ziriel, Ethan began, his voice quieter now. What do we do now? Her eyes locked onto his, and for the first time he saw vulnerability in them. I don't know, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. But I think we both know that whatever happens next, it's different now. He stepped closer to her, his heart pounding. He hadn't realized how much he'd come to care for her until this moment. There were still so many questions, so many uncertainties about their future, but in that instant, none of that mattered. The connection they shared was enough. I want to be with you, Ethan said, his voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions inside him. Not just as partners, but something more. Ziriel looked at him for a long moment, her expression softening. For the first time, there was no wall between them, no soldier or commander. Just 2 people standing in front of the stars. I never thought I could feel this way, Ziriel said, her voice full of wonder. But when you're with someone who understands you, truly understands you, it's hard to ignore what's right in front of you. Ethan's heart skipped a beat. So what does that mean? Ziriel took a step forward, closing the distance between them. It means I'm willing to try, she said softly, her eyes never leaving his. It means I'm willing to explore this. Whatever this is between us, Ethan's heart soared, and in that moment, all the doubts he had been holding on to melted away. He had never expected this. Never imagined that in the midst of a war, amidst the chaos and destruction, he would find someone like Ziriel. Someone who could see him, understand him, and care for him in ways no one ever had before. I think that's the first time I've heard you sound uncertain, Ethan joked, his smile wide as he took her hand gently in his. Ziriel smiled back, a rare, full smile that made Ethan's heart race. I'm not used to this, but with you, I feel like I could get used to it. And with that, their worlds, once so separate, merged into one shared reality. They weren't just allies anymore. They were something more, something deep and real that neither of them had expected but both knew was worth fighting for. As the stars twinkled outside the observation window, they stood together, hand in hand, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Together they would face the future not as human and alien, but as 2 individuals who had found something rare and beautiful in each other, a love that could bridge any gap. No matter how vast, the war had ended, but their journey was only beginning.